The night was darker than usual. Clouds covered the moon, and the wind howled through the empty fields. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, hitting the roof of Daniel's small farmhouse.
He sat alone in his kitchen, listening to the storm.
The old clock on the wall ticked slowly, and the wooden floor creaked with every gust of wind. Daniel was used to silence. He lived far from town, away from neighbors, away from noise. But that night something felt different. Something in the air told him he was not alone. A sudden crash came from outside. Daniel jumped from his chair. At first he thought the storm had blown something loose. Maybe a branch had fallen or the wind had broken part of the barn. But then he heard it again. A sharp metallic clatter followed by a sound that chilled his blood. It was not the storm. It was not an animal. It was a weak, broken voice. Daniel grabbed his lantern and his old coat. The rain slapped against his face as he stepped outside. His boots sank into the mud as he made his way toward the barn. The wooden doors rattled in the wind, almost tearing off their hinges. He pushed them open, and at once he felt the darkness inside swallow him. The smell of wet hay and wood filled his nose. He lifted the lantern higher, its yellow light cutting through the shadows. That was when he saw movement. Something was hiding in the corner of the barn. At first Daniel thought it might be a dog or a stray traveler, but as the light touched the figure, his breath froze. It was not human. A girl, if she could be called that, was crouched low against the wall. Her skin glowed faintly like moonlight trapped beneath glass. Her eyes, large and shining, reflected the lantern's flame. She was shaking, clutching her arm. Blood, silver blood, dripped from her wounds onto the barn floor. Her clothes were torn, burned as if by fire. When Daniel took a step closer, she flinched as if she expected another blow. Daniel's hand trembled. He had heard stories of strange sightings in the skies. Rumors of lights moving faster than planes, whispers of creatures not of this world. But never in all his years had he imagined one would be here, bleeding, hiding, afraid in his barn. The girl's lips moved. She tried to speak, but only a weak whisper came out. "Help," she said in broken English. The word was small, but it struck Daniel like thunder. For a moment he stood frozen. His mind screamed at him to run, to lock the doors, to call someone. But another voice inside him, a quieter one, told him to stay. She was injured. She was terrified. She was asking him, a stranger, for mercy. Lightning flashed across the sky, and in that moment Daniel saw her more clearly. Her face was young, her features both alien and strangely human. Her body shook from the cold and from pain. The silver blood kept flowing, staining the hay beneath her. She could not survive long without help. Daniel lowered the lantern slowly. His voice was rough from years of solitude, but he spoke gently. "Who are you?" he asked. The girl did not answer. Her eyes closed halfway, as if even speaking had drained her strength. She whispered again, weaker this time. "Help!" The rain roared against the barn roof. Daniel's heart pounded. If anyone found out he had an alien in his barn, his life would be over. The military would come. The government would drag him away. Neighbors would whisper his name with fear. Yet here she was, not a monster, not a soldier, but a wounded girl asking for kindness. A sudden noise made him jump. He heard distant engines through the storm. Lights moved faintly in the far distance, cutting through the darkness like knives. Someone was searching. They were looking for her. Daniel's chest tightened. The choice before him was clear, yet heavy. If he helped her, he risked everything. If he turned her away, she might die within minutes. He knelt down slowly, trying not to frighten her. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his eyes darting toward the door. "They're out there. They're looking for you." The girl's glowing eyes opened just enough to meet his. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm raged, the barn shook, and the sound of engines grew louder. Daniel knew then that his life had already changed. The moment he saw her, the moment she spoke that one word, his quiet world ended. Something greater, something dangerous had entered his life, and no matter what he chose, nothing would ever be the same again. The storm raged on through the night, but Daniel hardly noticed it anymore. He kept looking at the strange girl lying on the hay. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, and every now and then a faint glow flickered across her skin. The silver blood still stained her torn clothes, though it seemed to slow as if her body was trying to heal itself. Daniel had seen many things in his life, droughts, floods, even death, but never anything like this. He crouched closer, holding the lantern low so the light would not be seen outside. "What are you?" he whispered. His voice trembled, not from fear of her, but from the danger that surrounded them both. The girl's eyes opened slowly. They were brighter now, glowing faintly like stars reflected on water. Her lips moved, and with effort she said, "Lyra?" The name was soft, almost a sigh, but clear enough. Daniel nodded. "Lyra, is that your name?" She gave the smallest nod, then winced as pain shot through her body. Daniel reached for an old cloth and pressed it gently against her wound. To his shock, the bleeding slowed at once, as if her body responded differently from any human's. He tied the cloth carefully, trying to ignore the thought that he was touching someone, or something not of this earth. "Why are you here?" he asked in a low voice. "Who did this to you?" Lyra's eyes darted toward the barn doors, then back to him. Her voice shook. "Hunters, soldiers. They follow." She coughed, her whole body trembling. Run. "I hide." Daniel's blood ran cold. Soldiers. Hunters. If they were searching, they would not stop until they found her. He remembered the distant engines he had heard earlier. Maybe they were already circling the area. Suddenly, the barn was filled with silence broken only by the storm outside. Daniel realized he could hear faint noises carried on the wind. Voices, mechanical hums, maybe even dogs. They were out there, combing the countryside. The noose was tightening. He looked back at Lyra. Her glowing eyes pleaded with him, though she said nothing. She was too weak. Daniel swallowed hard. His mind screamed at him to send her away, to save himself. But his heart whispered something else. He had lost much in life, his wife, his family, his hope. Maybe helping her was madness, or maybe it was a chance to do something that mattered. He stood quickly and checked the barn doors. He shoved an old wooden beam across them to make sure no sudden wind, or worse, no sudden visitor, could push them open. Then he returned to her side. "You'll stay here," he said firmly, almost as if he was trying to convince himself. "No one will find you." Lyra's lips parted, but her voice was weaker now. "Danger for you." Daniel shook his head. "I don't care about me. I won't let them take you." Her eyes widened slightly, surprise flashing through them. Perhaps she had expected him to betray her. Perhaps she had known only fear and cruelty until now. Minutes stretched into hours. The storm kept pounding, and Daniel sat on a stool near the barn wall. His lantern dimmed almost to nothing. Lyra rested, though her sleep was broken by pain. Daniel's thoughts ran wild. Who was she really? Why did soldiers want her so badly? What was she hiding? Then, just before dawn, Lyra stirred again. She raised a trembling hand and pointed to her chest. "I carry secret." Her voice was so weak Daniel had to lean close to hear. "What secret?" he whispered. Her hand trembled as she pulled at a strap hidden under her clothes. From beneath the torn fabric she revealed a small object, a crystal-like device glowing faintly blue. It was no bigger than Daniel's hand, but it pulsed with strange energy. Daniel's breath caught. He had never seen anything like it. "What is that?" Lyra's eyes locked onto his. "Proof," she whispered. "They fear it." Before Daniel could ask more, a sound outside froze his blood. The low rumble of engines had returned, this time closer. Too close. He extinguished the lantern at once. The barn sank into darkness. Through the cracks in the wood, faint beams of light swept across the fields. Soldiers were searching again. Lyra clutched the crystal tight against her chest. Even in the dark, Daniel could see the terror in her eyes. She mouthed a single word. "Hide." Daniel's heart pounded so loudly he thought the soldiers outside might hear it. He crouched beside her, holding his breath, waiting as the searchlights moved closer. The storm had passed, but now a new storm was at his door. And he knew deep inside that whatever secret Lyra carried, it was bigger than both of them. The engines faded with the first light of morning, leaving only silence across the fields. Daniel sat in the barn, his heart still pounding from the long night. The alien girl, Lyra, lay weak but alive, her strange crystal hidden once more beneath her torn clothes. He had not slept at all, but he could not take his eyes off her. Every moment he expected the soldiers to return. Every shadow in the barn seemed like it could be watching him. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, Daniel made a choice. He slipped into the farmhouse and gathered food, water, and a few clean rags. He brought them back to the barn and knelt beside Lyra. She watched him warily, her glowing eyes filled with suspicion and pain. "I'm not your enemy," Daniel said softly. He tore a piece of bread and held it out. For a moment, Lyra didn't move as though she expected it to be poisoned. Then hunger won, and she reached out with trembling hands. She ate slowly, carefully, as if every bite might be her last. Daniel gave her water next, pouring it gently into her hands because she was too weak to hold the jar. The sight pulled at something deep inside him. He remembered nights when his wife had been sick, when he had stayed awake to care for her. Lyra was not human, but the look in her eyes, the mix of fear, pain, and hope, was something he recognized too well. As the hours passed, Lyra grew stronger. She tried to speak more, though her words were broken and heavy with accent. Why help me?" she asked one afternoon. Daniel sat back on the stool, wiping sweat from his brow after tending her wounds. "Because you needed help. Because you asked." She tilted her head, confused. "Others, they kill. Not help." Daniel looked at her for a long time. Maybe others forgot what it means to be human. Lyra studied him as though trying to measure his truth. Then slowly, she reached into her clothes and touched the hidden crystal. "They want this," she said, her voice low. "I keep safe. Alone, I die. With you." She stopped, struggling for words. Maybe live, Daniel didn't know what to say. He had no idea what the crystal truly was, but he knew one thing. If the soldiers wanted it so badly, then keeping it here was dangerous beyond measure. Yet, for reasons he could not explain, he felt bound to her now. Her survival had become his burden, and maybe his purpose. Days passed. Daniel hid Lyra in the barn, bringing her food and keeping the doors locked. At night they heard patrols in the distance. Vehicles rumbling down dirt roads, voices calling out, searchlights sweeping the dark. Each time Daniel stayed awake, ready to mislead or fight if anyone came too close. Lyra's wounds began to heal faster than he expected. The silver blood hardened into strange scars that shimmered faintly under the lantern's glow. Sometimes in her sleep she whispered words in a language Daniel could not understand, sharp alien sounds that filled the barn with unease. Other times she clutched the crystal tightly as though even dreams could not take it from her. One evening Daniel sat beside her, sharpening a knife against a stone. He thought she was asleep until she spoke suddenly. "You lose someone." Daniel froze. "What do you mean?" Lyra's glowing eyes opened, soft but piercing. "I feel in you." Empty place, he turned away. He had not spoken of his wife in years, not to anyone. "My wife," he muttered at last. "She died long ago." Lyra studied him quietly, then said, "Pain makes strong, but also alone." Her words cut deeper than he expected. He realized she was not only asking for help, she was offering something in return. A bond, fragile but real, was forming between them. But danger was never far. The next morning, Daniel walked to town for supplies. In the market, whispers filled the air. Strangers spoke of the alien fugitive. Soldiers had doubled their patrols. Rewards were being offered: gold, food, even land for information. Daniel's stomach tightened. If anyone suspected him, his farm would be burned, his name cursed forever. Yet when he returned home and saw Lyra waiting in the barn, he knew he could not betray her. That night, Lyra revealed more. She traced a shaky line in the dirt with her finger, drawing shapes Daniel did not recognize. "Many worlds," she explained. "Empire. Controls. Kill. Silence. Truth." She touched her chest where the crystal lay hidden. "This shows. Proof." Daniel leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Proof of what?" Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "Crimes, death, lies. If people see Empire fall." The words chilled him. She was not just a runaway. She was a key to something greater, something that could shake not only her world but his as well. Before Daniel could reply, the sound of engines rumbled again, closer than ever. Lyra's eyes widened in fear. Through the barn's cracks, beams of light cut across the field, moving straight toward the farmhouse. Daniel's hand tightened on his knife. The bond they had built in those few days was about to be tested. He would either stand with her against the storm, or lose her forever. The night was heavy with silence. Daniel sat in the barn, listening to the faint hum of engines crawling closer across the fields. The sound grew louder with each passing minute, steady and menacing like a predator circling its prey. Lyra clutched the crystal close to her chest, her glowing eyes wide with fear. Her breathing was fast, uneven. She did not need to speak, Daniel already knew. They were coming. The first beams of light swept across the farmland. Bright searchlights cut through the darkness, moving back and forth like the eyes of giant beasts. Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. He moved quickly, dimming the lantern until the barn sank into shadow. The soldiers were no longer far. They were on his land now. A loud knock shattered the silence. Daniel froze. The sound came from his front door. The soldiers had reached the farmhouse. He turned to Lyra, pressing a finger to his lips. She nodded, curling deeper into the hay, trying to hide her glow beneath the torn blanket he had given her. The crystal pulsed faintly, its light barely contained. Daniel stepped out of the barn and closed the doors behind him. The storm from days ago had left mud across the yard, and the boots of soldiers now splashed through it. 3 men stood at his porch, rifles slung across their shoulders. Their uniforms were dark, marked with strange patches that Daniel did not recognize but instinctively distrusted. "Evening," one soldier said sharply. His eyes scanned Daniel from head to toe. "We're searching for something. You seen anything strange?" Daniel forced his face to remain calm. "Strange?" He gave a rough laugh. "Nothing stranger than this weather. Nearly lost half my barn roof in the storm." The soldier narrowed his eyes. "We're looking for an outsider. Dangerous fugitive. Reports say it may have passed through this area." Daniel shrugged. "I live alone. I don't see much of anyone out here." Another soldier stepped forward, his boots leaving deep prints in the mud. "We'll take a look around." Without waiting for permission, he signaled 2 others toward the barn. Daniel's heart sank. He tried to keep his voice steady. "Barn's just cows and hay. You won't find much there." But they didn't listen. Their heavy boots crunched across the yard, heading straight toward the barn doors. Daniel's hand twitched. Should he fight? Should he run? His old rifle was inside the house, useless now. His knife was in his pocket. But against trained soldiers, it might as well be nothing. The barn doors groaned as one soldier pushed them open. His flashlight sliced through the dark interior. The beam swept across the hay bales, the wooden beams, the old tools hanging on the wall. Daniel held his breath. The light moved closer, slowly. It brushed past the corner where Lyra hid. For a single terrifying moment, Daniel thought her glow would give her away. But at that exact instant, thunder rumbled in the distance and the flashlight flickered. The soldier cursed under his breath and smacked the side of the lamp. The beam turned away, missing Lyra completely. Nothing but dust, the soldier muttered. Daniel exhaled slowly, though he did not let it show. The men left the barn and returned to the yard. The leader turned back to Daniel. His eyes were sharp, suspicious. If you see anything, you come to us. Understand? Daniel nodded. Of course. The soldiers lingered a moment longer before heading back to their vehicle. The rumble of the engine faded into the night, and the searchlights disappeared beyond the hills. But the danger was not gone. Daniel knew this was only the beginning. They would return. They always returned. When he finally went back into the barn, Lyra was sitting upright, her face pale, her hands shaking. So close, she whispered. Daniel sat down beside her. His hands were still trembling, though he tried to hide it. Too close, he said. Next time they won't just look. They'll tear this place apart. Lyra lowered her gaze. You risk for me, why? Daniel had no answer at first. He stared at the lantern's faint glow. Finally, he said, because you're not a monster. Because you don't deserve to be hunted. For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. It was small, fragile, but real. Then, we fight together, she whispered. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time he realized the truth. This was no longer about hiding an injured stranger. This was about survival, about defiance, about standing against something far larger than his quiet farm life. The bond between them was no longer just fragile trust. It was a dangerous promise. Outside, the night returned to silence. But Daniel knew the peace would not last. The Empire's soldiers had his scent now, and the next time they came, they would not knock. The soldiers did not return that night, but their presence lingered like a shadow over the farm. Daniel barely slept. Every creak of the farmhouse made him glance at the window. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps in the yard. He knew it was only a matter of time before they came back, and next time they would not leave so easily. In the barn, Lyra rested against the hay, her eyes closed. But she was not sleeping. Her hands gripped the strange crystal tightly as though letting it go would mean her death. When Daniel entered with food in the morning, she opened her eyes and studied him. There was a heaviness in her gaze, as if she had been waiting for this moment. You must know, she whispered. Her voice was still weak but steady. Daniel frowned. Know what? She sat up slowly, pulling the crystal from beneath her torn clothes. Its surface glowed faint blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. Truth, she said. This... Why they hunt me? Daniel's eyes narrowed. He crouched down to get a closer look. The crystal was warm, humming with strange energy. It felt alive. What is it? He asked. Lyra's lips tightened. Proof, Empire lies. Empire kills. This shows all. Before Daniel could respond, she pressed the crystal against the barn wall. At once the wood lit up, glowing as if it had become glass. A holographic image burst into the air, shimmering in blue light. Daniel gasped and staggered back. He saw cities, towering alien cities filled with people. Then he saw fire raining down on them, ships from the sky unleashing destruction. The images shifted again, showing soldiers in the same uniforms Daniel had seen at his door. They dragged families into the streets. They burned villages. They silenced anyone who resisted. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen war before, but never like this. These were not random battles. They were executions. Lyra's voice broke through his shock. They rule by fear. They take worlds. My world, others too. All who fight. Disappear, the images continued. Daniel saw leaders signing documents, smiling for cameras, while behind them soldiers carried out massacres. Then he saw something worse, humans. Not many, but enough. Men in suits shaking hands with alien generals, trading goods and resources, turning away while blood was spilled. Daniel's stomach turned. So they've been here, he whispered. All this time, Lyra nodded. Your world, next. They come slow, soft, then chains. The holograms faded and the barn returned to darkness. Only the crystal's faint glow remained. Daniel stared at it, his mind spinning. He wanted to deny it, to believe it was just lies or trickery. But the images had been too real, too raw. They had the weight of truth. Why show me this? He asked at last. Lyra's glowing eyes met his. Because now you choose. Help me, truth spreads. Hide me, truth dies. If they take crystal, all gone. Daniel felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. He was just a farmer, a man who had wanted nothing more than to live quietly after losing everything. But now the universe had thrown this into his lap. Proof of crimes that could topple empires. Proof that could drag his own world into chains. I'm no soldier, he muttered. I can't fight an empire. Lyra shook her head. Not soldier, human, one human brave. More follow. Her words cut deep. He thought of his wife, of the promise he had once made to her to live with purpose, not fear. That promise had been buried when she died. But now, looking at Lyra, he felt it stirring again. Suddenly, the sound of engines roared in the distance. Daniel jumped to his feet, his hand flying to his pocket where the knife rested. Lyra clutched the crystal tight. Through the cracks in the barn wall, beams of light flickered once more. The soldiers were back faster than expected. Daniel cursed under his breath. They're not giving up. Lyra's face hardened. They know. They fear truth. Daniel grabbed a tarp and threw it over her glowing form. Stay hidden, he hissed. His heart raced, but this time there was no hesitation in his movements. He had seen what the Empire was capable of. He knew now that if they took her, if they destroyed the crystal, the galaxy would sink deeper into silence and blood. As the soldiers' voices grew louder outside, Daniel realized the truth had already changed him. He could no longer pretend this was just about survival. It was about choice. He could run and save himself, or he could stand and protect Lyra, protect the truth she carried. He tightened his grip on the knife. The barn walls shook as heavy boots drew near. Lyra's faint whisper reached him, full of fear and trust. Daniel, don't let them take me. He looked back at her, and for the first time he answered without doubt. They won't. The barn doors rattled as soldiers slammed against them. The night air filled with shouts. The Empire was at his doorstep once again, but this time Daniel was ready. The barn doors shook under the soldiers' blows. Dust fell from the rafters, and Lyra clutched the crystal close to her chest, her glowing eyes filled with panic. Daniel's heart thundered, but his hands were steady now. He knew there was no more hiding. The Empire had found them. Follow me, he whispered urgently. He pulled the tarp tighter over her glowing skin and guided her to the back of the barn. Years ago, he had built a hidden hatch leading out to the forest, a way to slip unseen if raiders or thieves ever came. He had never imagined it would be used to escape soldiers from another world. The wood creaked as he pulled the hatch open. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth. "Go," he urged. Lyra hesitated, but Daniel pushed her gently. "Go now." The barn doors splintered behind them. Shouts filled the air. Flashlights cut through the dark like spears of fire. Daniel and Lyra crawled through the hatch and into the tall grass, the night swallowing them whole. "Spread out," a soldier's voice barked. Boots pounded the ground. Beams of light swept the field. Daniel pulled Lyra low and whispered, "Stay down. Don't move." They crawled on hands and knees, the wet grass soaking their clothes. The soldiers were only yards away, their lights flashing dangerously close. When the voices moved in the other direction, Daniel grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the tree line. They slipped into the forest, branches whipping against their faces. The night was alive with sound. The crunch of boots behind them, the distant growl of engines, the sharp crackle of radios. "Faster," Daniel urged. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he didn't stop. Lyra stumbled, her body still weak from her wounds, yet she kept running, clutching the crystal tight. A beam of light cut through the trees. "There!" a soldier shouted. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks tearing through the night. Bullets struck the trees, sending splinters flying. Daniel yanked Lyra behind a fallen log. They crouched low as sparks flew from the bark. His mind raced. He had hunted deer in these woods, tracked foxes and wolves. He knew the land better than any outsider. "This way," he whispered, pulling her toward a narrow animal path hidden by brambles. The soldiers thundered past, their shouts echoing through the forest, but Daniel and Lyra slipped deeper into the dark, unseen. For hours, they ran. When they finally stopped, the forest was silent again. Daniel leaned against a tree, gasping for breath. Lyra sank to the ground, trembling, her glowing skin faint beneath the tarp. "They won't stop," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They never stop." Daniel crouched in front of her, his chest still heaving. "Then we keep moving. We don't let them catch us." Lyra looked at him, tears glimmering in her strange eyes. "You bleed," she said softly, pointing to his arm. Only then did Daniel notice the warm trickle of blood soaking through his sleeve. A bullet had grazed him. The pain hit him all at once, sharp and burning. But he forced a smile. "Just a scratch." She shook her head, reaching out with trembling fingers. She touched the wound, and for a moment her hand glowed brighter. The pain eased, though the cut did not close completely. Daniel stared at her, stunned. She had given him some of her strength, though it clearly cost her. "You didn't have to do that," he said. Her voice was weak but steady. "You protect me. I protect you." The bond between them deepened in that moment. They were no longer farmer and fugitive. They were something more. Two souls bound by survival, carrying the weight of truth against an empire. The stars shone faintly above the trees. Daniel looked up at them, the vast sky stretching forever. Somewhere out there, entire worlds were waiting, enslaved by the empire. And here, on his quiet farm, he had stumbled into the center of it all. But there was no time to think. In the distance, engines roared again. Searchlights swept across the treetops. The soldiers were closing in, hunting them like wolves. Daniel pulled Lyra to her feet. "We move now. We head for the river. Once we cross, they'll lose the trail." They ran again, the forest alive with pursuit. Dogs barked in the distance. Radios crackled. Flashlights darted like fireflies. Daniel led Lyra down twisting paths, across streams, through thickets that tore at their clothes. His body screamed in pain, but he did not stop. At last, they reached the river. The current was strong, black water rushing under the pale stars. Lyra hesitated. "Too deep," she said fearfully. Daniel gripped her hand tighter. "It's our only chance. Trust me." Together they plunged into the water. The cold bit into their skin, dragging at their limbs. Daniel fought to keep them both afloat as the current swept them downstream. Behind them, shouts rose. Soldiers reached the riverbank, their lights flashing wildly, but the current carried Daniel and Lyra farther into the dark. They clung to each other, shivering and gasping until the voices faded. Only then did Daniel pull them onto the far bank, collapsing against the mud. Lyra lay beside him, clutching the crystal, her eyes wide with exhaustion and relief. Daniel turned to her, his voice hoarse but firm. "We're not safe yet, but we're alive. And as long as we're alive, we fight." Above them, the stars burned brighter than ever, and somewhere deep in the galaxy, The Empire had no idea that one farmer and one alien girl had just slipped through their fingers. The river had carried them far from the soldiers, but Daniel and Lyra knew the Empire would not stop hunting. For days they moved under the cover of night, sleeping by day in caves and thickets. Daniel's body ached, his arm still sore from the wound, but he kept going. Each time he thought of giving up, he looked at Lyra clutching the glowing crystal, her eyes full of silent determination, and he found strength again. At last, they reached an abandoned watchtower on the edge of the hills. It was a ruin, crumbling with age, but it offered shelter. Daniel gathered wood for a small fire while Lyra sat in the shadows, her face pale with exhaustion. The crystal pulsed faintly in her hands, calling out like a heartbeat across the stars. "They will follow," Lyra whispered. "But we have chance. Now or never." Daniel sat across from her, the firelight dancing on his worn face. "What chance?" Her glowing eyes lifted to meet his. "To show truth to Galaxy. If crystal reaches sky, no more silence. Everyone sees. Everyone knows." Daniel frowned. "How? You don't have the machines, the towers. They've shut it all down." Lyra held the crystal higher. "Crystal carries signal. If I link to stars, it spreads. All worlds hear, but..." She trailed off, her voice shaking. "Once I send, they find us. We cannot hide." The weight of her words hung heavy between them. Daniel knew what it meant. This was the end of running. Either they revealed the truth and faced the Empire's fury, or they stayed silent and let darkness spread forever. He looked at her, this strange, wounded girl who had stumbled into his barn, who had turned his quiet life upside down. She was more than a fugitive now. She was a voice for millions who had been silenced, and she was trusting him with everything. "Do it," Daniel said finally. His voice was steady. "Show them." Lyra nodded, her hands trembling as she pressed the crystal to the ground. At once, the tower filled with blue light. The walls shimmered, the air hummed, and a beam of energy shot upward, piercing the night sky. Daniel shielded his eyes as the light spread, stretching beyond the hills, beyond the atmosphere, into the endless stars. Images burst into the sky, holograms projected for the galaxy to see. The burning cities, the massacres, the corruption of leaders, the secret deals with Earth. It all unfolded in a storm of light, undeniable and clear. Across the stars, people watched. Farmers on distant moons dropped their tools. Workers in alien factories froze, staring at the skies. Soldiers in the Empire's ranks lowered their weapons, shaken by what they saw. The truth spread like fire in dry grass, unstoppable, undeniable. Daniel stood beside Lyra, his chest tight. He thought of his wife, of all the quiet years he had wasted in grief. And now here he was, standing in the heart of a storm that would change history. But the moment did not last. Engines roared in the distance. Lights cut through the forest. The soldiers had found them. "Daniel," Lyra whispered, clutching the crystal. "They come." Daniel's hand went to his knife. He knew it was useless against rifles, against machines, but he stood tall, his eyes hard. "Then we make them fight for every step." The first shots rang out, bullets tearing through the tower walls. Daniel pulled Lyra behind the rubble. Splinters of stone cut his face, but he did not flinch. The soldiers stormed forward, shouting, their lights blinding in the dark. Then a strange thing happened. From the hills, more lights appeared, flickering torches, dozens of them. Farmers, villagers, outcasts who had seen the truth in the sky. They came running, shouting, armed with nothing but tools, sticks, and fire. The soldiers hesitated, startled. The people were rising. Lyra's voice rose above the chaos, strong and clear. "Truth is free. You cannot hide it now." Her words echoed, and for the first time Daniel saw fear in the soldiers' eyes. They fired wildly, but the crowd kept coming. The power of truth had broken the silence. Daniel fought like a man reborn, pushing back against the Empire with nothing but courage. He knew he might not survive, but it did not matter. What mattered was that Lyra had spoken, that the galaxy had heard. When the battle quieted, the soldiers were retreating, overwhelmed by numbers and by fear. The people cheered, lifting their torches high. Lyra stood in the center, her crystal glowing brighter than ever, her face shining with hope. She turned to Daniel, her voice soft now. "You gave me chance. Without you, no truth, no hope." Daniel shook his head, exhausted but alive. "I didn't do it alone. You carried the light. I only kept it safe." Lyra smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. She reached out and touched his wounded arm gently. "Galaxy will remember you. Human with courage." For the first time in years, Daniel felt peace. He looked up at the sky, now alive with stars and signals carrying Lyra's truth to every corner of space. A farmer, forgotten by the world, had helped change the course of history. And somewhere deep inside, he knew his wife would have been proud. The Empire had been stunned. The galaxy had awoken, and nothing would ever be the same again.